Back then, the average house cost around $15,000. Can you imagine? And that still felt like a mountain. But you could raise a family on one income, mow the lawn on Saturdays, and know your neighbors by name. The white picket fence dream actually came with a front porch, a creaky swing, and a doorbell that really rang. Mortgages were paper, pens scratched, and a handshake still meant something. A gallon of gas was about 30 cents, and that wasn't a sale. That was normal. You'd pull into the station, and an attendant in a crisp cap would fill the tank, check your oil, clean your windshield, and sometimes hand you a free map folded like a magic trick. No credit cards, no touch screens, just coins. Nod, and a smile that smelled faintly of gasoline and aftershave. You saw cars everywhere parked at diners, idling at red lights, rumbling through the newborn suburbs. The Ford Mustang hit the streets in '64, and suddenly every teenager had a poster tacked above their bed. It wasn't just a car. It was freedom on four wheels, chrome catching sunlight like a promise. And if you knew someone who had one, you never forgot the way the engine made your ribs hum. The average U.S. salary in the 1960s hovered around $7,000 a year. It wasn't much, but it stretched like good taffy. One income fed the whole house, kept shoes on growing feet, filled the gas tank, and maybe even paid for a week at the beach in a cottage that smelled of salt and old board games. You didn't feel rich, but you didn't feel like you were sliding backward either. Paydays were envelopes, not apps. Budgets were pencil lines on a kitchen notepad. Summer camp meant bug spray, bunk beds, and that one counselor with a guitar who only knew 2 chords but sang like the woods were listening. You'd write postcards home, having fun, even if I cried the first night and tucked them under. The rubber band at the trading post. Mosquito bites, cafeteria mystery meat, and campfire songs stuck to your memory like sap on your fingers. The milkman clinked fresh glass bottles onto your doorstep before you ever worried about expiration dates. You heard the rattling crate before breakfast was even on the table, and if you were lucky, he left chocolate milk too. Little surprise that made Tuesday feel like Christmas morning. Caps popped, cream rose, and cereal tasted like childhood. Watching the moon landing live meant crowding around a tiny black and white TV with rabbit ears wrapped in tin foil like a science project. Picture fuzzy, sound crackling, nobody blinked. Neil Armstrong's voice wobbled through the static, and for one shared inhale, the country felt like it was sitting in the same living room, holding its breath. Later that night, parents stepped outside and stared up, as if they might catch footprints in the light. The Cuban Missile Crisis wasn't just news. It was a knot you carried under your collarbone. People kept radios close and watched the sky a little longer than usual. Schools practiced duck and cover, linoleum pressing cold against forearms. For a few long days in October '62, the world felt like it had one heartbeat, and it was stuttering. Then it passed, like a storm that left everyone listening for thunder that never came. Back then, cameras had flashbulbs you swapped out after every shot. They'd pop, sizzle, and go hot as you pocketed the spent ones like empty cartridges. Family gatherings meant lining everybody up, squinting into the glare, and taking 5 pictures just to be sure one turned out. A week later, you'd flip through glossy prints and laugh at the blinks. When the Beatles hit the Ed Sullivan stage, it was like someone flipped a switch you didn't know you had. The haircuts, the screaming, the way girls clutched their chests like they'd seen tomorrow. And maybe they had, for one night. Every living room in America became a front row seat to a black and white revolution, the needle of the future dropping into the groove. Seatbelts? We didn't know her. The back of the station wagon was a rolling playroom. Blankets, toys, a sleepy dog changing lanes with every turn. No one wore a belt. Somehow we survived, bouncing with each bump, passing a paper bag of snacks like a peace treaty, fighting for the window seat, and the chance to feel the wind slap your cheeks. Clotheslines drew chalk lines across the sky. Every backyard had wooden pins in a wicker basket, and sheets snapped like sailcloth in the afternoon breeze. Towels dried stiff as boards, but smelled like sunshine and soap. You didn't need a dryer to feel clean. You needed weather and a little time. Lucy wasn't just a rerun. She was a relative. You knew the chocolate factory, the grape stomp, the schemes. You knew where the laugh would land, and still it worked every time. It wasn't about surprise. It was about comfort, the theme music pouring like warm syrup over a room that already felt like home. Every kid had a Viewmaster reel. You'd click through tiny worlds, national parks in 3D, cartoon characters frozen mid-laugh, castle turrets you could almost touch. That little red viewer teleported you click by click to places your school atlas only hinted at, and sometimes you'd go through the whole reel twice, just to be sure it was still there. When Walter Cronkite came on, the room fell quiet. You didn't argue with him. You listened. Same suit, steady cadence, eyes straight into the lens. He told you what happened, not how to feel about it. No panels shouting, no ticker crawling. Just the news, like a trust fall you knew he'd catch. Down on Main Street, the barber pole spun its candy cane spiral outside a shop. With checkerboard floors and leather chairs polished by 1,000 elbows. Men talked baseball, city hall, and who'd finally fixed the pothole by the post office. No appointments. You waited, read the same dog-eared magazine, and left lighter in both hair and worry. Birthdays were saved on 8mm film, trailers of ordinary miracles. You'd drag out the white screen, thread the reel just so, dim the lights, and listen to the soft chatter of sprockets. The picture jittered, everyone moved a little too fast, and the room erupted when Uncle Joe waved at the camera like it could wave back. Later, the reel coiled into its metal tin like a secret. Pong hadn't landed yet, but pinball ruled the neon corners diners. Bowling alleys, bus stations that smelled of coffee and rain. You didn't need graphics, just flashing lights, sharp dings, and a steady flipper hand. 2 nickels bought you a pocket universe where the only report card that mattered lit up in bulbs. Tilt if you tried to cheat fate. Aluminum ice trays were medieval. You lifted the frozen lever with both hands, hoping the cubes wouldn't launch across the kitchen. When they finally cracked free, it was loud enough to startle the dog and make the cat leave the room with dignity. Somehow, those cubes tasted colder than anything modern ever made. You wore saddle shoes until they practically learned your name. Scuffed by morning, polished by recess, never quite comfortable, never quite unbearable. Everybody had a pair, whether they liked them or not. Footnotes to 1,000 class photos. Typing class was an orchestra of clatter. Heavy keys, bell dings, fingers blackened with ribbon ink. Miss one letter, and the whole sheet went crooked. Forget to hit return, and the line just ran off the cliff. Yet when you caught a rhythm tick-tick-tick-ding, you felt like you were keeping time with the century. Polaroids were little miracles. Press the button, hear the soft buzz, send the square out into the air like a secret. Someone always said, shake it, and you always did, even if it didn't help. When the picture bloomed, faces surfacing from fog, it felt like proof you existed, a moment caught before it could sink. Vending machines ate a couple coins and actually fed you back. Ice-cold soda in a glass bottle, gum that snapped, a sandwich in a crinkly triangle if you felt brave. No touch screens, no card readers, just stubborn metal buttons and coils that sometimes stuck, daring you to give the side a respectful thump. Back then, America felt like it was going somewhere. Interstates braided across maps. Rockets climbed out of gravity. Ideas chased each other around kitchen tables. It wasn't perfect, not by a long mile, but people believed in better, in the next version of themselves. And when you looked around, you really felt like you were part of the motion. The ice cream truck didn't just play a song. It declared summer. You heard that tinny melody from 5 blocks away, yelled for change, and sprinted barefoot across hot sidewalks that taught you to dance. The menu never changed, but the joy never thinned. Bomb pops tasted best when you earned them in sweat. In school, duck and cover grills were treated like spelling lists. You slid under your desk, covered your neck, and pretended wood and a wish could stop fire. Nobody argued. It was Tuesday, and the clock still crawled toward lunch. Evenings had their own rituals. Drive-in theaters turned parking lots into dreamland speaker hooked to the window. Popcorn in a paper tub, your breath fogging the glass during a kiss on screen. When the reel broke, the whole place booed like neighbors at a block party. Somewhere, a flashlight bobbed like a lighthouse. Phones had cords that curled like pigtails, and party lines meant you knew the rhythm of your own ring. You twirled the rotary dial, listened to clicks, counting your patience, and learned to stretch the handset cord to the pantry for privacy that didn't quite exist. Libraries stamped cards with a satisfying thunk. Encyclopedias stood like a white picket fence on the shelf 26 promises you could trust. If you didn't know a thing, you looked it up, and the answer smelled faintly of paper and glue. The Sears catalog arrived like a holiday, pages of future circling under ballpoint stars. Kitchen tables were battlegrounds for board games and truce talks. Tupperware parties echoed with laughter, and Jell-O salads wobbled like cheerful physics. Lunchboxes clanked, thermoses hissed, and the PTA bake sale could fix what the budget couldn't one brownie at a time. Nights ended with test patterns and national anthems. TV signed off and left a hum in the room, like the house was thinking. Outside, fireflies scribbled, their light across the dark, and you caught a few in a jar with holes punched in the lid, promising to let them go before you fell asleep. And through it all, paper boys on bicycles, hopscotch chalk ghosts, the top 40 on AM radio, Motown's heartbeat, you carried one simple certainty. Tomorrow would arrive, and it would probably be a little better than today. Not perfect, just better. And you'd be there for it, lawn freshly mowed, porch light on, ready to wave at whoever passed by. The scariest part wasn't the drill. It was how normal it felt. Metal lunchboxes were built like tanks, your favorite show or comic plastered on the front, corners dented like battle scars, and a thermos inside that smelled vaguely of milk and soup and something you could never name. No matter what you packed, the latch always got wobbly, the handle always cracked, but you carried it every day like armor, stickers peeling, initials scratched in with a house key. Before cartoons were called content, we had Howdy Doody, Captain Kangaroo, and Hopalong Cassidy. The puppets were odd, the sets were cardboard simple, and the jokes were older than the furniture, but we didn't care. It felt like they were talking directly to you, through the screen static and straight into your living room. That made all the difference and turned mornings into a secret club. You walked to school with no app, no map, no adult shadow, just a backpack, a jacket, and instructions to come straight home. Most of us didn't. We took the long way, counted the cracks, skimmed a penny across the gutter water, stopped at the corner store for bubble gum or baseball cards, then drifted back by dinner as if the day had been a straight line. We knew the crossing guard by name and the stray dog by temperament. The record player was sacred. That click, the soft hiss, then the music every birthday, every Saturday, every heartbreak. The soundtrack came from vinyl. You learned which 45 skipped and how to tame it with a coin taped to the tone arm. Studied sleeve art like scripture and read liner notes the way some people read horoscopes. Nobody threw on background noise. You listened, the needle tracing a tiny black canyon until the room felt stitched together by sound. Plastic rain bonnets folded into neat little squares and lived at the bottom of every mom's purse. The sky would cloud over, and boom, out came the bonnet like a superhero cape that cared more about hair than heroics. Alongside it, Mints, safety pins, a compact, and just enough coins for the bus. And you didn't just flip channels. You fought the TV. One person held the rabbit ears like they were conducting lightning while the other shouted, "Right there." "No, back." "Let go, don't breathe." Tin foil crowned the antenna, and a steady picture felt like winning a war with aluminum. Street lights were the clock. When they flicked on, you knew it was time to head home, no matter how good the game was. Bikes shrieking to a halt, chalk ghosts of hopscotch fading in the dusk, moms leaning out the door with one word, "Now." TV didn't go all night. When the last show ended, a flag waved on screen while the national anthem played. Then came the test pattern, a target for the sleepless, and a soft hiss of static that meant bedtime or books or staring at that frozen image like it held secrets. It didn't, but it felt like a curtain call for the day. You could actually buy candy with pennies, walking into the corner store with a handful of coins and walking out with a tiny brown bag full of wax bottles, candy buttons, licorice whips, fireballs, and maybe a jawbreaker that lasted 3 recesses. The bell over the door, dinging like applause. The encyclopedias came in the mail. You didn't Google things. You waited 6 to 8 weeks for Volume G and memorized the order they were promised. Salesmen knocked with glossy brochures, promising smarter kids and gold-lettered knowledge. When the set finally arrived, it lived on the living room shelf like royalty, even if you mostly opened D for dinosaurs and M for moon. Soda didn't fizz the same unless it came in glass. Those bottles needed a mounted opener bolted to the garage stud. Caps sprang off and clinked into a little trap, and you lined the extras on the workbench like trophies. No twist-offs, you had to work for the good stuff, and it tasted like summer with a sharp edge. Back then, banks didn't just want your money. They bribed you with kitchen appliances. Open a savings account, walk out with a toaster or a set of glasses or a blender loud enough to wake the baby, the toaster often better than the interest, the glasses making tap water feel fancy. The whole house paused when Bonanza came on, or Gunsmoke, or the Andy Griffith Show. Westerns were everywhere, and so were laugh tracks. Families watched together, not in silence, but in bursts of commentary. "He's done for. That guy's no good. Turn it up." It was the sound of the living room breathing, a chorus of popcorn, opinions, and the occasional shush. The smell of fresh mimeograph paper hit like a wave warm and inky with purple letters that smudged at a touch. Teachers handed them out, and half the class lifted the sheets to their noses like magic. Lunch from home meant a paper bag and a sandwich, slightly flattened by math books, bologna and mustard, chips in a waxed paper pouch, an apple that thumped the desk, and maybe a cookie if someone remembered. Trades happened under the table like a stock exchange. Peanut butter for ham, chips for a cupcake, grapes for a single glorious Twinkie. You knew the slideshow was coming when the lights dimmed and the projector clicked on the tray. First clunk unmistakable, the bulb's heat making the room smell like dust and memories. Family vacations, blurry birthdays, aunts. You didn't know half the slides upside down. Elevators weren't automatic. They had people inside them, uniforms, sometimes gloves, a small wooden handle, and a long, slow ride calling out floors like a conductor. 4th floor housewares, linens, toys. Every trunk had one. A scratchy wool blanket that never actually got used, always there, just in case. For a roadside picnic or an emergency snowstorm, the last resort towel at Grandma's, loyal and a little itchy. Church clothes, itched shoes where stiff collars misbehaved. Sunday meant fidgeting on hard pews counting ceiling tiles, trying not to laugh during the long prayer. Sometimes the sermon stretched to forever. Sometimes you got a peppermint from Grandma, unwrapped slowly so the crinkle wouldn't echo. Popcorn didn't come from a bag. You poured kernels into a metal pot, added oil, and shook like your life depended on it, an arm workout with a rhythm. Shake, rattle, hope. The smell filled the house before the first pop. When it overflowed the bowl, you knew you'd done it right. with the occasional rogue kernel launching like a comet. TV dinners weren't fancy, but felt like the future peel back the foil. Wait forever, as the kitchen filled with the perfume of overcooked peas Salisbury. Steak mashed potatoes with a crater of gravy and a brownie that never quite cooked right, a little metal tray of modernity you could balance on your knees. Tinsel wasn't plastic yet. It was thin, shimmering metal, placed one strand at a time, patient as a watchmaker Christmas lights glowing behind it, so the whole tree twinkled like a postcard, clinging to sweaters, cats, and the cuffs of your church coat, and no one minded. Radio buttons clicked like tiny safes. Push one, and the rest popped out like jealous siblings, presets learned by touch. The sound crackled, the music played, and nobody called it analog. It just worked, and you felt clever for finding a station with a single press. Behind the TV, little tubes glowed faint orange, humming softly like the machine was breathing. If the picture flickered, you gave the side a gentle smack, and if it died, someone went to the hardware store with a bulb wrapped in a paper bag. Fixing things wasn't optional. It was assumed, and the guy at the counter knew your first name. The whole country froze when Kennedy's funeral aired black and white images. The slow drumbeat, the riderless horse, one of the first times America truly mourned together in silence. Millions of living rooms stitched into a single aching hush. Hair curlers weren't reserved for salons. You wound them tight before bed, foam, plastic, pins, and in the morning unraveled them like a present, praying the curls kept their promise until lunchtime. Classrooms had pencil sharpeners bolted to the wall silver crank. Wood shavings curled like cinnamon peels. Chalk dust clung to sweaters, and someone got to clap erasers outside, sending white thunder into the air. Cursive rolled across the board like a roller coaster you had to memorize by heart. Playgrounds were metal and daring. The slide scorched your legs in August, and the merry-go-round spun until the world wobbled. We took turns being brave, scraped our knees, and came home with gravel in our socks, in stories we could tell between bites of meatloaf. Phone booths waited on corners, glass doors smudged with fingerprints. You fed them dimes, unfolded the city from the yellow pages, and cupped the receiver like it held weather privacy. In the hum and a little thrill, hearing your voice echo off the glass. Soda fountains were classrooms of cool. The kid behind the counter wore a paper hat and knew how to spin a milkshake silver cold, while you sat on a swivel stool watching chocolate syrup ribbon the glass like an invitation. S&H green stamps filled drawers, books of sticky squares, traded for a toaster you didn't need or a lamp you didn't know you wanted. We licked, pressed, and dreamed in catalog pages. Certain value could be collected like fireflies. Science kits smelled like sulfur and curiosity. Model glue stuck to fingers and dragons got painted on Saturday afternoons. We built things that didn't quite work and believed in them anyway. Imaginations doing the rest. Mailboxes had flags that flipped up like little exclamation points. Raise one and trust the world to notice. The carrier knew your dog, your porch, your handwriting, and a letter could soften the whole day. Snow days announced themselves on the radio, a name read in a list you held your breath to hear. Transistor radios crackled in your palm, a single earbud threading the news to one ear while you planned a fortress out front. And through it all, the scariest part wasn't the drill. It was how ordinary it felt to practice for disaster, to crouch under desks, and pretend wood and wishful thinking could stop a flash brighter than the sun. We believed because grown-ups said we should, and belief was a kind of shelter. Then the bell rang, we stood up, and life went on. Pennies for candy, records for sorrow, streetlights for time, and a world that seemed, most days, to keep its promises. School milk came in little cartons that fought back. You'd try to open them neatly, pinching at the beak like you'd been taught, and they'd still tear sideways or splash your sleeve. They arrived in gray metal crates, condensation sweating down the sides, smelling faintly metallic and barn cold. No matter how icy they started, by snack time they were lukewarm and stubborn, like they'd been in on the joke the whole time. Grandma's sewing machine didn't need electricity, just feet treadle rising and falling like a heartbeat under the table. You'd watch her work the pedal like a drummer, hands feeding patterned fabric with a calm that made the room hush. The needle clicked, whirred, and sang in a straight, faithful line, better than any digital promise. It always smelled like dust and lemon polish and the soft thunder of patience. Coke lived in heavy glass bottles, ice cold from a red-lettered chest cooler that swallowed your arm to the elbow. In the diner's corner, cigarette machines glowed like little chrome jukebox's metal levers, tiny windows, and a satisfying clunk when a pack dropped into the tray. Nobody asked your age. It was a different world. Not better, not worse, just tilted at a slightly stranger angle. Color TV didn't sneak in. It marched. When somebody on the block got one, the neighborhood held a parade to their living room. You stood there with folded arms, nodding like you understood hue and saturation, while even the commercials looked dramatic. Cartoons felt like stained glass. Football fields looked like freshly mowed dreams. It was the future, fuzz and all, balanced on a tiny wooden console. Bank drive-thrus weren't just convenient. They were magic shows. You'd press the tinny speaker, tuck your envelope into a clear capsule, and whoosh air carried your errands away like a message in a pneumatic bottle. It came back with a receipt, a lollipop, and the feeling that for once machines were on your side and rooting for you. Sunday comics were an event. The newspaper unfolded across the living room carpet like a carnival map, 2 full pages of color and mischief. Peanuts, Dick Tracy, Little Orphan Annie. Dad rustled the headlines, but your front page was Calvin's slingshot grin. Ink smudged your fingers, and for a few panels, life spoke in word bubbles and punchlines. Tipping your hat was a small gesture with a big echo. Men lifted brims in hello and goodbye. Women wore white gloves downtown like it was nothing. You dressed up to go out, Woolworths counted. A jacket felt like manners you could wear, and sunglasses were a promise that the afternoon would take its time. The sidewalk was a playground, without batteries or permissions. Kids crouched in tight circles to play marbles, cat's eyes flashing like planets. Jacks hopped along the pavement, pickup sticks held their breath, and rules got written 5 minutes before they got argued. Victory tasted like scraped knees and the chalky dust of triumph. Some kids swore you could hear secret messages if you spun records backward. So there we were, fingers on vinyl, turning the world the wrong way, listening for whispers behind guitar solos. Maybe it was static, maybe it was nothing, but it felt like treasure hunting in the grooves, like the universe might leak a secret if you were patient and weird enough. Empty lots turned into ballparks each summer. No coaches, no clipboards, no umpires, just a pile of hats for bases and a cracked bat wrapped in tape. Someone's little brother played outfield. Someone's dog chased doubles to the fence. You went till the sun tipped orange, and somebody's mom shouted that dinner had been ready for 20 minutes. At the department store, you could stick your feet into a real X-ray machine to check your shoe fit. Bones lit up in greenish glow. Toes wiggled like little skeleton puppets. It felt futuristic and a little dangerous, which of course made it perfect. Safety was a word that lived mostly on warning labels no one read. School buses had green vinyl seats and no seat belts, just the shared physics of childhood. You bounced along with windows half down, hair whipping, backpacks clattering like drums. Field trips weren't checklists. They were paper bag lunches, souvenir pencils, and hoping you didn't end up next to the kid who got carsick on curves. Assemblies were a thing. Everyone marched into the auditorium, holding tiny flags, sang patriotic songs that made the floorboards, and watched a slide projector clack its way through a visiting ranger's photos of mountains you could practically smell. Mostly, it was a chance to fidget until the principal's eyebrows restored the peace. Gas stations handed out freebies, state maps folded like magic squares, toy dinosaurs, glass tumblers with patterns that made orange juice look fancy. Grown-ups got a full tank and a smile. Kids got loot for the glove compartment. Fuel was fuel, but a freebie turned errands into a minor holiday. Fountain pens were messy business. You came home with ink-stained fingers and blue freckles on your shirt, but it felt adult, like signing your name meant something and the paper knew it. Cursive was a rite of passage, loops and tails, drilled on wide-ruled lines until your G's stood up straight and your SS stopped swaggering. When the teacher stopped circling them in red, you felt upgraded. Roll-on deodorant lived in little glass bottles with cold metal balls that clicked at your wrist. The scent was sharp and medicinal. It worked unless you overdid it, and then your shirt learned the lesson for you. Medicine cabinets looked like science exhibit salves, tonics, and labels that sounded like they'd been written by a kindly pharmacist with a perfect mustache. Recess was a trading floor. Comic books for baseball cards, the good marble for 2 okay ones. A solemn promise about an issue you definitely had at home. Deals were sealed with a handshake and the kind of trust only kids can. Afford backpack economies running on rumor and honor. Fizzies turned water into experiments. Cherry, grape, root beer tablets fizzed like little volcanoes and made your glass burble like a lava lamp. You could pretend to be a scientist or just enjoy the way sweetness learned to sparkle. Tongues turned colors. Laughter turned loud. Tube socks climbed to your knees with red or blue stripes near the top, cuffed or scrunched, proud as a team uniform for a team you invented on the walk to school. Shorts, sneakers, zero shame. Every hallway looked half like gym class and half like a parade. Chemistry sets came with things that would never pass a modern sniff test reel: chemicals. Glass beakers, tiny burners, instructions written in a tone that assumed you were both brilliant and careful. You made foam volcanoes and a stink bomb you promised never to deploy indoors. The shag carpet survived mostly. Transistor radios were pocket-sized miracles. You held a whole world of sound in your poem, a little dial squinting you through crackling AM dreams. Beatles, Motown, the 9th inning with 2 outs. The battery died too soon, but while it lived, the future had a voice, and it was singing right into your ear. Cereal boxes came with mail-in promises. You cut out the coupon, taped coins to a card, and waited through the geologic time of 6 to 8 weeks. Half the prizes were junk. All of them were treasure, because the mailbox said your name, and the world had mailed you proof that wishes sometimes arrive with postage due. And that was the rhythm. Machines that whooshed and clunked, paper that smelled like ink and hope, games that ran on chalk, and afternoons that ran on trust. It wasn't perfect, but it was sturdy. The day ended when the streetlights came on and the radio faded, and the last thought before sleep was simple: tomorrow will probably be good too. Tupperware parties weren't really about the Tupperware. They were pastel bowls with burp seal lids, and an excuse for moms to dress up, laugh loud, and trade recipes disguised as gossip. You'd hear the cackle from the kitchen, and no leftovers would live a decade in the same bowl lid mysteriously missing. Yet it somehow still sealed well enough to keep a casserole alive till next Tuesday. Tang was orange, a little sour, and absolutely iconic, not because it was the best, but because astronauts drank it. At one NASA association sealed the deal. Suddenly, every kid wanted a glass of space, even when Mom mixed it too strong, and it bit your tongue with citrus bravado. We sipped anyway, staring at the moon like it might wink back. Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In arrived like a confetti cannon, bright lights, faster jokes, costumes that looked like daydreams, punchlines that made grown-ups howl, while kids just blinked and giggled on delay. You didn't get half of it, but it felt like grown-up TV, gone mischievous, and that was enough to keep you up past bedtime. Rotary phones were not built for speed. If your friend's number had too many nines, you were committed to a full afternoon. Slip a finger on the seventh digit, start over no mercy. But the sound, that staccato click and the satisfied return spin, felt more real than any glass tap. A conversation began before anyone said hello. Bench seats were exactly that, benches. No belts, no cup holders, just a horizon of vinyl. You'd corner too hard and end up a pile of siblings, squealing and peeling apart. The only safety feature was Mom's forearm flying out at every stop sign, the most reliable airbag the era ever invented. Plastic couch covers were a summer curse in the name of preservation. They trapped every ounce of heat and announced themselves with a squeak. Sit down in shorts and regret immediately. Legs stuck, back sweaty, and a constellation of imprints on your skin. You weren't allowed to peel them off, at least not until company left, and maybe not even then. The yellow pages weighed a ton thick as a dictionary, exiled under the phone or shoved beneath a wonky table leg. Need a plumber? Flip a page. Lost the dog? Check the classifieds. It was a phone book, a booster seat, and a doorstop in one stubborn brick of small print certainty. Film came in little black canisters you loaded by hand. Pop the back, catch the leader, wind until the sprockets bit. Every click of the shutter felt like a tiny commitment. No previews, no redos, just hope in a cardboard envelope at the photo counter 2 weeks later. Surprise was part of the art. Slide projectors were never quiet. Family slideshows marched with a clack W, IR chunk from the round carousel. Grandma by the lake, a blurry vacation, a birthday composed of elbows. Half the slides were upside down. You sat in the dark with a paper plate of sheet cake, pretending it wasn't boring while secretly loving every squeaky narrative correction from the couch. Canned spaghetti was a weeknight lifesaver you didn't interrogate. Warmed in a saucepan, poured into a chipped bowl orange, soft, Italian by label, if not by lineage. It was cheap, cheerful, and reliable. Some nights, that's what dinner needs to be. Drive-in theaters or magic on asphalt. You'd pull in, hang the metal speaker on your window, and hope it worked. Later, you tuned the car radio and prayed the battery would forgive you. Station wagons, convertibles, a sky full of stars, popcorn everywhere, and no one cared, because the car was already a glorious mess of summer. Diaper boxes had instructions printed right on the side. Oil and bleach. No disposables, just neat stacks of white cloth, folded to perfection and fixed with safety pins like tiny silver anchors. The pail in the bathroom wasn't for show. Laundry day smelled like detergent, rubber pants, steam, and stubborn love. Metal toy trucks were practically weapon-solid, sharp-edged, always missing one heroic wheel. They survived sandboxes, stairs, and archaeological burial in the backyard, emerging decades later with the paint still defiant. If your little brother threw one, it left an honest dent that doubled as a timeline marker. Everyone remembered where they were when JFK was shot. School, work, home didn't matter. Radios went solemn. TVS flickered awake. Grown-ups cried. Even kids understood something had cracked open, and the air felt different afterward. The country learned how to mourn in unison. Green stamps were everywhere. You peeled them at the grocery store, licked them into little booklets, and dreamed through the reward catalog blenders, fans, maybe a new toaster. When you finally had enough to trade in, it felt like winning a tiny lottery you built one checkout at a time. Help wanted ads came in 2 neat columns. Help wanted male and help wanted female. No one in charge questioned it. That was just the map. Secretaries here, mechanics their world split down the middle. Crossing the line took grit and a crowbar made of courage. Soda bottles were money in disguise. You lugged them back to the store in a clinking cardboard cradle and came home with nickels that quickly became candy. You could spot a returnable from across the street, a particular greenish glint of opportunity. Movie theaters started with the cartoon bugs, Popeye, Tom and Jerry, a little burst of joy before the feature. You laughed, slurped, and settled into 2 hours of magic that tasted like buttered popcorn, waxy chocolate, and cold soda that fizzed as loud as the projector. Dad's aftershave was brute green bottle on the shelf like it paid rent. One splash in the hallway bloomed with cedar, menthol, and a stern idea of masculinity. Every dad had a brand. Every kid winced the first time they tried it. To this day, that sharp, spicy cloud still smells like grown up to the 60s generation. Sunday night was shoe polishing time. Newspaper spread, dusty loafers off, tin creaked open. The room filled with that clean, oily smell. Brush, buff, shine. You did it because Mom said, but also because glossy toes meant you were ready for Monday. Preparation masquerading as ritual. You could smoke on airplanes. Flight attendants passed out free cigarettes, and ashtrays lived in every armrest like little metal mouths. Nobody opened a window. Everyone exhaled. You landed smelling faintly like a fireplace, and a promise you'd eventually reconsider. The Sears catalog was a brick of dreams. Toys, suits, furniture, the whole country bound in glue. You dog-eared pages, circled with pen, pinned hopes to margins, and trusted Santa to take notes. When the Christmas wish book arrived, it beat any parade on TV. Ordering by mail was a masterclass in patience. You circled the treasure, filled the form, licked the stamp, and waded through the glacial flow of 6 to 8 weeks. Then, one day, a brown box appeared with your name dressed in block letters. The weight made the contents feel like gold. New plastic lunchboxes had a smell all their own, sweet, sharp, a little chemical. Lift the lid. Bologna sandwich in wax paper. Chips in a crinkly bag. Maybe a Twinkie if fortune smiled. That first vinyl whiff meant school was officially back, whether you were ready or not. The kitchen table wasn't granite or glass. It was formica, usually yellow or mint, with chrome legs that wobbled just enough to tip your milk if you laughed mid-sip. You ate there, did homework there, fixed the occasional toaster there. Scratched, stained, and somehow perfect, the heart that kept the house on beat. If all that stirred good memories, you'll love jumping ahead to the bold, bright, and unforgettable days of the 1980s arcades, mixtapes, neon, the works. Tap the video on your screen and step into a decade of bigger music and the kind of fun that glows in the dark. The time machine's warmed up and waiting.